I'm Jay Shepard, and this is the second installment of my Arkansas All-State Jazz guitar lessons. I was extremely happy to hear all the good comments from the first one, so now it's time to press on and look at the second etude. The second etude is a slower tempo ballad, but don't be fooled. It's the hardest of all three of the etudes for many reasons. There are a few concepts and techniques that you must be able to learn and master to make this piece sound anything like it needs to. One aspect that makes this piece especially difficult is the style of the piece. It's a ballad and it should be played very connected and have a free singing kind of style to it. Unfortunately, that's very difficult on the guitar. And to be able to do that, you have to connect 4 and 5 note chords sometimes that contain the melody and a top voice. This is an extremely hard thing to do because you're trying to connect a whole chord to another chord extremely as smooth as you would connect one note to the next note. On top of that, there's usually a note on the top voice of the chord that really is a melody that has to be played a little louder and brought out more than the rest of the chord. So to aid you in understanding some of the left-hand concepts of how to do this, let's look at a few ways that a finger can move during a chord change. The first way I'd like to look at these left-hand movements is what's known as a pivot finger. A pivot finger is when you have a finger that plays the same fretted note on 2 different chords. So basically the finger will pivot around while the rest of the fingers find the next chord in the same place. That way it doesn't never have to leave contact with the string. The first 2 chords of this piece are actually a great example to show you a few of these concepts, including the pivot finger. Here's an example of the first 2 chords right here. And notice how the first and second fingers, when they move to the next chord, don't necessarily have to pick up off the string. They can just pivot around while the fingers find the place on the next string. Now watch this example of my fingers moving from one chord to the next. The next way I want to talk about a finger moving to a new chord is by it being a guide finger. A guide finger is when a finger stays on the same string, but it just moves to a new fret on the same string. This is helpful because it means you can use the feeling of touch to help find the next note. And it's a little more secure because you never have to lift the finger completely off the string, maybe just enough to release the pressure from it a little bit. This makes it a very secure motion, probably only second to a pivot finger as far as terms of security. In this next example, notice how the third finger is a guide finger moving down a fret. Another concept in the left hand involving changing chords is when you're not using a finger on a current chord that's about to play on the next chord. Even though you're not using this finger, you should still pay close attention to it. In fact, you should probably prep it by getting it as close to the next chord change as you can possibly get it while you're currently playing the one you're on. The pinky is an example of this movement in the first 2 chords of this etude. Watch as I move the pinky gradually towards the next chord, and it's not too far away that it can't get to it in time. The final way I'd like to talk about a left-hand finger moving to a different chord is by jumping. This is jokingly referred to as teleporting the finger by my classical guitar teacher, or sometimes I call it just using the force. Because you just have to literally get one finger from one string to a different string or a different fret and a different string as fast as you can. So there's no guide finger or pivot finger to help you out. Let me show you a extreme example to where all 4 of the fingers have to find a new string and a new fret. Okay, in these first two measures, what you want to pay attention to mainly is the connectivity of the chords and making it sound as singing and flowing as you can. Just do a lot of slow practice and, just take a couple beats at a time and try to connect them. One part you may have trouble connecting is the little pickup notes before that are in between certain chords, like before beat 3 of the first measure, that kind of thing. We have a and a 3 count. What you might do is make those two notes a hammer-on, so you can actually pick the first one, hammer on to the second one, and then while you're hammering on, start thinking about the shift. That way you're not late, and it may make it sound more smooth. Always lead with your eyes with the shift. So in other words, be looking where you're going to go before you shift. That way you have a good target in your mind how to get there. Good luck, and here's the first two measures. Measures 3 and 4 feature kind of the same thing, same concepts. One thing you want to watch out for is on the and of 4 in the first measure, you want to be sure and cut off the C in the beat before it. That way the F can ring by itself as the melody note and the C won't still be ringing out. Another thing to look out for is at the downbeat of measure 5, which I've given you in addition to measure 3 and 4. I went ahead and filled out that chord. The editor fills out the chord later in this A section at the end of the piece, and I don't know why he didn't decide to do it there, but I decided to do it, and if you want to do it, you can too. One other little cute thing I put in there is going to beat 3 in measure 3, the first measure of this example. I put a little portamento slide off of that high G, sliding down to the E on the 12th fret. This kind of helped enhance the connectivity and the singing style of the notes. Give it a try and see if you like it. If you don't, then you don't have to do it. Okay, on measures 5 and 6, things you want to watch out for are things that we saw in the last etude. One is balancing the power of the chords in the individual note lines so they balance. You want the singing style of the individual note lines and the top notes to come out on the chords. Another thing to watch out here for is I put in a little grace note slide upward into beat 3 on both measure 5 and 6. There's another, again, it's one of those things, if you like it, you can keep it. If you don't have to do it, but it just sounded right to me, so I put it in there. Okay, measures 7 and 8 is just kind of more of the same. You have a single note line continued from the phrase before with an upper mordant on beat 4 of measure 7, which is not very difficult. It's just a hammer on and pull off from the next note in the scale from the A, which is a B flat. So it'll be on the 5th and 6th fret of the E string. You'll see it. And the 8th measure is just some transition chords to the next phrase. Okay, this next section starts a little double time feel. Notice I've played all the 16th notes kind of like a double time 8th note swing feel, and all of the 8th notes as quarter notes if you were in double time. So you'll notice the swing feel right away. I've also put in some grace note slides into notes, and you may or may not like those, but if you do, you can keep them. So here it is. Okay, next we just have more of the same. There's nothing a whole lot to talk about here. Just observe the rhythms and play the right notes and try to do something cool with them. Measures 15 and 16 deserve a little extra attention. You have these double stops, which are two notes played at the same time. Notice these are in thirds. They start on beat 2 of measure 15 and end on the next beat. You want to play these with the right hand with the pick and the second finger at the same time. It's hybrid picking. And you want to fret them the F sharp and the A with first and third, the G and the B flats second and fourth, then the A and the C sharp with first and third again, then the B flat and the D with second and fourth. Then that way your second finger's already on the D for the next one, so you can just fret the F that remains with the first finger. Put in some slow practice on this and work on the finger independence, and you should have no problem. '17 and '18, while not quite as tricky as the double stops in the left hand, do feature some troubles for the left hand in the fact that they're all shifts. So you're playing the same octave shape melodically here, but you don't get to play with different fingers, so you just have to shift literally the same fingers in the same shape as quickly as you can, as legato sounding as you can, which is very difficult. So put a lot of slow work on that. Also, be sure and pick them with a hybrid picking, so use your pick and your middle finger here. That way when you get to chords in between those sections of octaves, you can just strum them with the pick freely. Another thing is look at the muting of the octave shape. Be sure your first finger mutes the strings that are on either side of it, and your pinky is secure on the high note of the octave. And also, if you want, use your palm, since you are hybrid picking, to mute the strings that are lower than the ones you're playing. That way you don't have any sympathetic vibrations and the sound comes out really clean. 1920 is just more of the same, although it gets a little trickier with the rhythm and the stress it puts on your left hand to execute and make the sound legato and flowing. Also notice throughout these octave shapes, I've also put in some of the grace note slides that I also put in the single note playing. It takes a little extra effort, but I think it helps the phrasing a lot. And again, it's one of those optional things you can do. If you want to try it to do it on another note that you feel deserves it, you can do that too. Just try to do something that makes it sound a little better. All right, 21 and 22 again is more the same texture and techniques. Pay careful attention to beat 4 going into beat 1. So beat 4 of 21 going into beat 1 of 22. That little diminished arpeggio um, thing happening with the octaves is very tricky. So take some time and learn the fingering and be consistent and strive for minimal motion, and you'll make it happen. Okay, in 23 and 24, we're finishing off this section of octaves in melodic playing, and we kind of transition back into the chordal texture. Pay close attention on beat 3 and 4, and then the downbeat of, so beat 3 and 4 of 24 into the downbeat of 25. Those three chords there. Analyze, which fingers are the pivot fingers, which ones are guide fingers, and if any of them are jumping, and look at it real carefully like that. That way you get the smoothest sound you can. Okay, 25 and 26 should look familiar. That's kind of like the first two measures with some variations, so find them and learn them. 27 and 28 should also look very familiar. Again, we're just repeating the A section of this piece, so now it's the variation on the third and fourth measure. One cool thing to take a look at is notice the inner voice moving at beats 3 and 4 in measure 28. Be sure you get good resolutions from both the G to the F of the downbeat of measure 29, and then you get the C sharp to resolve to the C natural in 29. '29 and 30 are also just variations on the first time you heard the A section. So just learn them and pay close attention though to the last beat in 30. Notice the two 30-second notes going into measure 31. I played those on two different strings and kind of did the sweep picking thing with them. So I just downstroke both of those in a little quick fashion. So see if you can get something like that to happen in your technique too. It might help out. Measure 31 sounds like it's the penultimate measure of this piece, but it just gives like a false resolution to measure 32, which starts a sequential kind of cadential extension of the piece. So take a note of that and treat measure 31 like it is the last measure, even though it's not. It'll kind of help give a little extra musical interest to the stuff that comes from 32 to the end of the piece. And the last two measures just complete the little sequence that has been created as the ending of this piece. Um, Notice I broke the last chord into two parts. I played the A on a 12th fret of the A string as an open harmonic. This kind of sounded like a little effect and helps give the note a little more sustain, and it makes the other four notes a little easier to grab. Also notice a little vibrato I put on the last note, as I've been doing as well on some of these melody notes. And the kind of vibrato you want to use goes side to side, where you're pushing the string, back and forth towards the neck and then towards the bridge. That way you're not doing the rock vibrato, but the one that's like a classical violin vibrato.